Okay, so welcome to Psalms for Life, in which we explore a different chapter of Psalms each week. For those of you watching on YouTube, we seem to have a problem with Zoom, so that's why I'm teeny tiny, and you see some of the class participants here, except for those on, I think, iPhone. Okay, so Psalm 53 is a segula for someone who has had a frightening experience and who is fearful. Even if this is a phobia, this is a good psalm to say. Also, it's a psalm to put fear in the heart of one's enemies. Now, it's very similar to Psalm 14. Those of you who have familiarity with the Psalms, you will recognize right away that similarity, except Psalm 14 is about the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, the first temple, whereas Psalm 53 is very much about the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash, the second temple. So the first temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, and the second temple was destroyed by Titus, which is Titus in English. And we will be learning a little bit about Titus as we proceed. It's also about the future Geula. Okay, so Rav Hirsch notes another difference between Psalm 14 and Psalm 53. The name of Hashem used in Psalm 14 is Hashem's name, Ado. Okay, I'm not saying the last part. And the name here is Elohim. Ado, that name of Hashem, is a name of mercy, a name of kindness, a name of pity, a name of compassion. Elohim is a name of strict justice. And the reason here, says Rav Hirsch, the name Elohim is used throughout this psalm is because of the spiritual degeneration that took place after the destruction of the second temple. Strict justice was needed in order to bring about a cure for the degeneration. And it's like a medicine. When somebody is mildly ill, you might just give them a light medicinal tea, a little homeopathic dose, perhaps. When someone has a very severe, shocking illness, you might have to hit them with the hard stuff, so to speak. And this Psalm's theme is also, as I mentioned, about the Geula and the coming of Mashiach, who the commentators say is going to suffer like David did, because there will be people who will fight against his kingship. Now, some of our sages say Mashiach will be universally pretty much immediately accepted, while many others say that there will be arguments against him and people will not necessarily accept him right away. Okay, we're going to begin. Lamanat seach al machalas maskil leDavid. For the conductor on the machalas, which is a type of instrument, a maskil of David. And of course, we've discussed maskil many times before. And a maskil, again, is an intellectual message, an intelligent message, a message which is described from an intellectual manner. It's a message of intellectual enlightenment, and so on. And the machalas is a type of instrument. And Meiri says that this instrument is capable of producing a very sad, mournful, plaintive tone. And also, it might be related etymologically to mechila, which means forgiveness. So when we want forgiveness, we don't just say, hey, forgive me. We say, please forgive me. I didn't mean it. I'm suffering too, and so on. And so that works into this idea of mournfulness and plaintiveness. Rashi identifies the machalas with machala and affliction. Okay, not like quite like a plague, but some kind of affliction, and it can be physical, it can be non-physical, and this, says Rashi, is the affliction of the gullus, of the galut, the exile, which we have all been suffering since the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash. So we have this idea, we're on notice that this is, not going to be one of those happy, upbeat psalms, at least not initially, but it's also very powerful and succinct and really packs a good punch. And now, Sforno says that this is actually a continuation of the previous psalm, Psalm 52, and the theme of people. And the theme of people, it's not really about Titus, he says. He says more that this is about the, I'm sorry, I was just trying to see if I could make this work. This is more about the theme of those people who we spoke about last week, like Doeg, who are heartless scholars. And we see hints throughout the psalm of people who, like Rebbe Nachman says, are false leaders. He also calls people related to this scholar demons. And this will peak in today's times. There are a lot of false leaders out there who have no heart. They might be brilliant, they might know a lot, but they have no heart. And there is no rebuke for them, okay? For whatever reason, they get away with what they get away with. And we see this all over the world. Now, we can look at this and say, this is horrible, this is terrible, and it is. Or we can look at it and say, oh, sages all predicted it. David HaMelech all predicted this. Our prophets all predicted this. And therefore, it's a sign that the Geula is imminent. And that's a great way to look at it, because that keeps you filled with Amunah and Bitachon, and Amunah and Bitachon, which are the faith and trust, the pillars of surviving these very difficult times. Okay, we'll continue. Amar Naval Bilibo, Ein Elohim. Hish chisu v'his ivu avel. Ein ose tov. The fool, or the corrupted or degraded man, says in his heart, there is no God. They acted corruptly and despicably with iniquity, and there is no one, not one, who does good. So again, who is this degraded man? So we're going to start with Titus, as I mentioned in the beginning. And we can keep in mind also the people I just mentioned, those false leaders, and Rome itself, where Titus was a famous general from, a famous leader from. Rome itself was a very brutal, heartless culture who appreciated logic and intellectual reasoning more than anything else. They were different than the Greeks in that. We are still living in the extension of that culture. The West, it's really the extension of Greco-Roman culture, but we know that this is the galut, the exile of Rome. That is the final exile today. And Titus also had this kind of appreciation of logic and doing whatever you want, no heart, no caring, no compassion. He was abominable. He was a horrible, horrible man. He wanted to turn the Beit HaMikdash into a temple for Roman gods, which, by the way, the Romans didn't really believe in. You should know. The Roman gods were not really believed in even by the Romans. He cursed and blasphemed in the Beis Hamikdash itself, and he committed an immoral act with a prostitute in the Kadosh HaKodashim, which he is a total desecration of Beis Hamikdash, and he cut the parochis, the curtain in front of the Kadosh HaKadoshim. He cut it with his sword, and it's said to have gushed blood in some kind of painful miracle. And he announced he had killed Hashem. Okay, chas v'shalom. So after this, he took, it is said, all the gold and kalim, all the holy vessels of the Beis Hamikdash, he wrapped them up in the paroches, in the curtain, and he brought them to Rome. And there's a dispute whether our vessels from the Beis Hamikdash, whether they are in Rome, hidden away in the Vatican's basement somewhere, or whether they are actually buried underneath the Temple Mount. And scholars debate this. Our sages debate this as well. In any way, he acted corruptly and despicably, as it says in the verse. And this refers to his cruelty, his immorality, and also dishonesty in money matters. And we see this from his theft of items that didn't belong to him. So why is money matters alluded to in this verse? So in the rabbi saw, this is really interesting, the rabbi saw that at a certain point, the Jews couldn't withstand the desire to worship idols. We can't imagine this today. Most of us don't have a strong burning desire to worship idols. As a matter of fact, if you walk in a room with a statue or an idol, most of us just leaves us cold or filled with disgust. But the rabbi saw that this was destroying the Jewish people. So they begged Hashem to remove this desire from the Jewish people. And Hashem did. He said, you're right. It's going to destroy them internally. However, it was replaced. Okay. What came to the fore was a desire for money. And we know that the first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because of idol worship and immorality, and it says murder. The second temple was destroyed according to the Yerushalmi Talmud, the Jerusalem Talmud, that they loved money more than each other. As a matter of fact, it says specifically, since they loved their money, they came to hate one another because nobody could stand that someone else had more than him. Nobody could stand if someone else rose up or achieved financially. Everybody felt threatened. So this hatred, this sinas chinam, this baseless hatred that our rabbis speak of, the Jerusalem Talmud says is actually rooted in this desire for money, which replaced idolatry. Okay, and apparently it's still with us today, which is why we need the name Elohim, the strict justice. That's what the healing that people need. Now, just so you know, this is not specifically a Jewish problem. As a matter of fact, it's even more a problem in much of the non-Jewish world. It's actually a greater problem, and they cover it up with niceties. But if we look at the corrupt governments, unfortunately, in the Western world, in the so-called last bastions of liberty and freedom, we see that it's all about the dough. So if you look into how people come into Congress with $200,000 and they leave 12 years later and they're multi-millionaires, there's a very good reason for that. Okay, it's not their $120,000 a year salary. So we understand that this is a plague for the whole world. Money is a plague for the whole world. It doesn't have to be, because we do a lot of good with money. And when a Jew gives tzedakah and gives copious amounts of tzedakah above and beyond the minimum 10%, this brings about a rectification for transgressions with money. Okay, so let's go on to the next verse. Okay. Elohim mishamayim hishkif al b'nei Adam liros hayesh maskil doresh es Elohim. So Hashem looked down from heaven upon the sons of men, to see where there is a man of understanding, or one who reflects, okay? One who seeks Hashem. So David was such a man. And this is what motivated Shaul's jealousy, was that David was somebody who always reflected on himself. He was very honest with himself. He bodedut. We are told that he would awake at midnight, a breeze would blow, it strummed the strings of his harp, it woke him up, and he would do tikkun chatzos, the midnight lament, and also make hitbodedut. And it is said that the prophecy and the reception of the Tehillim came through hitbodedut. And what is hitbodedut? Yes, it is on the simplest level, talking to Hashem in your own words about whatever's on your heart and whatever's on your mind and in your heart. But it is also really a process of self-reflection. It's a process in which we speak our inner truth, we evaluate ourselves, we share the evaluation of ourselves and our lives and our histories and so on with Hashem. If you make hitbodedut every day, it makes, let's put it this way, it makes Yom Kippur a lot easier, because every day you're realizing, here are my strengths, here's the good stuff, here's what I can be proud of and I want to do more of. Hashem, help me do more of it. But Hashem, here are my weak points, here are my missteps, here is what I need to reflect on to do tshuva for, and so on. So that's why it's so essential to really spend some time talking to Hashem each day. We want to be like David. We want to be someone who reflects. We want to be someone who has this knowledge. Whatever we learn, we want it to tie into our hearts as well. And that's why we need this reflection, this self-evaluation, and so on. So it also speaks about the last part, one who seeks out God. Okay, so who seeks out Hashem? So who seeks out Hashem? One who reflects. That's what the verse is also alluding to. They are inseparable. You can't seek out Hashem in truth and in wholeness without reflecting on yourself. You have to have both pieces there. And in order to do this, we have to cling to the teachings of our sages and tzaddikim. They show us how to do it. Now, I spoke about Rebbe Nachman and showing us hitbodedut, the path of hitbodedut, which was already there. Everybody was making hitbodedut, so to speak. All the tzaddikim were, certainly Moshe Rabbeinu did, so on and so forth. But he brought it to the forefront of our attention. And we also have to learn from all our sages and tzaddikim. Okay, Rebbe Nachman said, don't dismiss a sage or tzaddik. If you have a connection and you relate to their teachings, learn it, take from it, take the good from it, make it part of yourself. He was very, very open to people learning what they needed to from whoever they connected to, as long as it was authentic Torah. Okay, let's continue. Hold on. Okay, we'll go to the next verse. We are on Dalet, on 4. Kulo sag yachdav ne'elahu ein ose tov ein gam echad. Okay. They are all sag, which we're going to translate now as dross. Okay, waste. Together they have become depraved. No one does good, not even one. So let's take a look at this word sag. I should have actually posted the letters for you. I don't know why I didn't. Samach Gimel, okay, is a key to understanding this entire psalm. So Rashi translates sag as being related to sigim, which is impurities, okay, which is why it's translated usually as dross, okay, impurities. Other commentators say it's related to nasog, which means to retreat, because we've retreated. We haven't made progress, morally speaking. Okay, we can debate all we want about individuals and so on, but we seem to be stuck, according to the Psalm, which is, of course, a prophecy, where we were when the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, in need of this harsh intervention, a harsh or strong intervention. So the Midrash says that in Psalm 14, rather than kulo sag, which it says here, it says here everyone is sag, okay? It says instead hakol sag. They have all gone astray. Now they are all dross. Now they've sunk to a lower level. Okay, so it's a slightly different emphasis here. Rav Hirsch says, and he speaks about not just us suffering with this affliction, but because it is an affliction to not be able to fight and get to that next level. Rav Hirsch says it also really refers to most of the people in the world. They have degenerated so much that any refinement in them has dissipated, and they appear to be beyond redemption. And sometimes this includes our people, chas v'shalom. It's very sad. But with our people, it's not true. We're not beyond redemption. We're never beyond redemption. No Jew is totally beyond redemption. We are able to return to Hashem. We are always able to return to Hashem. And that's why we have to look at individuals who we feel might be beyond redemption with at least a measure of pity. Okay. And, there's a question, there's a debate. Are we allowed to daven? Are we allowed to pray for other people to do teshuvah? Some say yes, and some say no. I lean on the side of saying, sure, yes, absolutely. They need our prayers too. Okay. So this is so interesting with this word. The Chida relates sag to the word gas, which is sag backwards, which is a spirit of haughtiness and arrogance and pride. And the link here is to the Talmud, which says that a Torah scholar is allowed to have a drop of gasus, of pride, so that people will respect his authority. He's allowed to express pride, a little bit of touch of arrogance. He's not really allowed to feel it inside, but he's able to express it. And to express it, he has to have some kind of connection to it. And he's allowed to express 1/64th a measure of one's pride. So if your pride could be divided up into a pride or arrogance pie, okay, if you're a Torah scholar, you can express 1/64th of that. If the rest of us, we shouldn't express this kind of haughtiness or pride or arrogance at all. Okay, now I liken this to a parent pretending to be angry in a serious situation. Sometimes, a child does something that needs correction, and we shouldn't react in anger. We should take a deep breath, calm down, and then go give the child discipline that it needs. Maybe it's a timeout, whatever, but we should really try to take a deep breath and calm down and not express anger, or not feel anger. But we may express anger in order that the child respects us. We may say, Mommy is very angry. And that lets the child know that you're serious. Okay. You're not feeling angry inside. This is the same thing with pride. Now, of course, we're all human and we're all going to feel angry. We're all going to feel haughtiness and pride at moments. But this is something that we should work on. Now, what's so interesting is that the gematria for both sag, and it's sag, okay, the dross and impurities, and gas, the reverse, which is that arrogance and haughtiness, is 63. And 63 are the parts of this gas, this pride, that must be that must be hold on one second. That must be, I'm sorry, I'm just letting people in. I see people are in the waiting room coming, wanting to come in. It's the 63 parts that must be repressed. So this is hinted to in the word sag in our verse, which it's just really a very amazing insight from the Chida, by the way. Now, Rashi says that this dross is referring specifically to Titus's people, his army, his servants, his whatever. They saw the depravity of Titus and his closest associates, and they remained silent. Now, I wanted to give you a okay, somebody asked if I would explain the significance of the gematria of 63. 63, again, is just the Talmud saying that it's the 63 parts of pride that must be hidden. There are probably many other significance, but that's what's significant to our psalm. So I just wanted to answer Naomi's question. Now, and if anybody doesn't understand, just jump into the chat or raise a hand and I'll answer your question. So Rashi says this is referring to Titus's people. Now, I want to say somebody asked me recently if she should read Josephus. And he, of course, is a famous secular historian, Jewish by birth. And I would like, and at the time my response was no. And I would like to say that I found a link with this psalm because Josephus is an apologist in a way for Titus. He makes excuses for him. Oh, it wasn't really him. It really was just some renegade parts of his army and so on. Josephus is, he's not only a heretic, he is like, here's what I would say. There's a new expression going around. It's called an as a Jew. I don't know if everybody's heard that. But as a Jew, I condemn Jews. God forbid. Okay. That's what a Josephus is. He's an as a Jew. All right. So we can avoid him. Maharal tells us, okay, that Titus was way worse than Nebuchadnezzar because Titus actually hated Hashem. And Nebuchadnezzar was cruel, but Titus, his cruelty reached a new level. It was beyond. Okay. And we know, I mean, we know how vicious the Romans were. Okay. We know that the Romans, the ancients in general, I'll just give you an example, a horrible example. If, God forbid, if they had a disabled child, they would leave it in the wilderness to die or be eaten by wild animals. If they had a girl and they wanted a boy, they would do the same thing. This is the cruelty of the Romans, and Titus's cruelty encapsulated and even exceeded the general cruelty. So no, we won't listen to Josephus, but we will listen to the Maharal. Okay. Let's continue. We are up to Hey. Halo yadu po'ale aven. Ochele ami. Achalu lechem Elohim lo kara'u. So did they not realize, these evildoers, they who devour my people as they would devour bread, they who do not call upon God? So again, most of this refers to the Romans and to Titus. However, Sforno reads this as referring, and I mentioned before, to the false leaders that Rebbe Nachman speaks about, the phony scholars. They may have some Torah knowledge, but they are corrupt. He says this refers specifically to corrupt sages and judges who care about money first. Again, this is going back to this switch from the love of idolatry to the love of money that occurred when idolatry was taken out of us. And they put their wealth first. And we mentioned this before because this is a theme of the past couple of Psalms, an underlying theme that when a Jew puts his own wealth above the well-being of the Jewish people, he falls into this very unflattering category, whether he's a Torah scholar or not. And this also can, on the simple level, refer to people who don't, when they eat bread, they don't make a blessing. Now, I'm not referring to people who don't know about it, obviously. I'm not. I'm referring to people who know and sincerely know what the power of the bracha is, and they make that bracha, and then afterwards they're going to make the birkas hamazon. They're going to bench afterwards, and therefore they're keeping Hashem in mind, and this idea of this psalm mentioning bread is that these people do not call upon Hashem. Again, we're not talking about people who don't know. It's very obvious. And so it's people who, I'm hungry, so yeah, okay, I know I should wash, but I'm not going to. I'm not going, I'm just going to eat. Okay. I don't need to, say a bracha. I don't need to keep Hashem into my my consciousness that he's the one who gave me my bread, okay, my meal, my Suda. Today, I don't know if, I mean, some of you are probably on the mini lessons on the WhatsApp, but today we spoke about Pekudei, the Parsha, Pekudei, and the Mishkan again, which of course is the main theme of these parshios. And the Mishkan says, Reb Noson, it's an anagram for mita, shulchan, kisei, and ner. A bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp. And with these four examples of items we can't live without, okay, they're mundane items. With these examples, we can connect to the idea of the Mishkan. How? Because using these items, and any item we have, these are just four iconic items that everyone has. Please Hashem, we should all have a bed and a table and a chair and a lamp. That's how we not only acknowledge Hashem, but that's how we elevate ourselves through the proper use of those items. And so when we sit down in a chair at a table, turn on the lamp, okay, and we just got up from bed and had a good night's rest, it's time before we actually eat the meal to go and to wash and to then eat the meal. And if you're not eating bread, so many women today don't eat bread. If you are not eating bread, then say the other appropriate bracha or brachos on your items of food that you are eating. And this is how we elevate everything in our home and our life, the mundane items. Okay, let's continue. We are on Vav. Sham pachadu fachad, lo haya fachad, ki Elohim pizar, atzmos chonach, hevishosa, ki Elohim me'asam. Okay. They will be stricken with terror, a terror such as never was, for God scatters the bones of those who encamp against you. You shame them, for God has rejected them. This refers to Titus, and it's describing what will happen. And really, we see it unfolding a little bit here, maybe even more than a little bit, with Gog and Magog, the war of Gog and Magog, as we begin to usher in the Geula. So first of all, let's discuss Titus. We'll go back to him. Titus had a horrible fate. So this is a description also of Titus's fate. The Talmud tells us he was on a ship headed back to Rome, ostensibly with the kalim from the Beis Hamikdash. And he apparently felt that Hashem was still alive, and he cursed Hashem. Can you imagine? And he said, I'm going to destroy you. Once I get back on dry land, I'm going to destroy you. Okay. A voice called out to him. Somehow he had I don't know, it's not bas kol, I don't know what it was, that a tiny creature is going to do battle with him on dry land. So, what's the story? Hashem sent a tiny gnat to fly up Titus's nose. Imagine this. Okay. So, such a vivid imagery. Every time I hear this story, I cringe inside. To fly up Titus's nose. And this gnat tortured him with not only with, like, I guess, tinnitus, because it was buzzing inside his brain, but with pain. It really hurt, constant. And the story goes, one day he was walking by a blacksmith, and the blacksmith was banging his metal hammer on the anvil. You know, that's what blacksmiths do. And the sound must have startled the gnat, and the gnat stopped buzzing. So for an entire month, Titus hired someone to come and stand outside his digs and to bang the hammer on the anvil. A different blacksmith, probably they did it in shifts, because it would, stop the gnat from buzzing around and hurting him. And if it was a non-Jew, he would pay him for his services. And if he was a Jew, he said, you're already being paid. You're seeing me humiliated. You don't need to be paid. And unfortunately for Titus, it only lasted 30 days. And I guess the gnat, I don't know, they don't say exactly, but I guess he got used to the noise and it didn't work anymore. And Titus suffered for 7 years. And it said that the I guess, I don't know what they would be, the people who perform, what's it called? The autopsies came and they cut open his head. And inside they found that the gnat had grown to the size of a small bird with a beak of copper and nails of iron. Or claws, I guess, whatever a gnat has. That's what they describe it as. So whether that's to be taken literally or not, I don't know. But what we do know is that he definitely suffered from something in his head that obviously was a punishment from Hashem for his behavior. And it does say Hashem shamed them, and in this case, Titus. Now, Rashi says that this verse is describing that the terror of let's say the reincarnations of Titus in Rome today, or the incarnations would be better. And he says that even the absolute terror that Belshazzar experienced on account of Daniel doesn't compare to the terror that awaits the enemies of the Jews today. Okay. So we know again that we are in this final exile, and this final exile is, of course, Edom, Rome. And again, it does include Rome itself, but it includes the Western world at large. And also attached to this exile is Yishmael as well. And it's like a double exile. Okay, so it's Rome, but it includes or has an attachment on it of Yishmael. And we have to understand that Rashi is speaking about the degeneration of basic decency, because every nation has to have basic compassion, morals, decency. And we went quite a bit into Titus in the beginning about what a monster he was. And the legacy sadly still lives. Now, we look again, I am sitting here in Brooklyn. I'm going to mention the United States. we look at what the American dream was, but we had laws that were written by man, and we could say the same for every country, including Israel. We have laws, we have a constitution, and so on, written by man, which can be very easily corrupted and changed at will. They are not divine law. And we see today that these laws do not protect us. They just don't. They're either being ignored. If you live in New York, you know exactly what I mean. They're either being ignored or they're being unpoliced, like in London. The police come and stand there and they arrest people who are pro-Israel and let the people shouting death to the Jews do what they want. So we see that the distortions and the degeneracy and so on, we see it before our eyes. And this leads to this pacha, this terror that the nations, or the people, I should say, who are engaging in this kind of immoral violence, and the violence in their hearts, just like Titus, just like the Romans, and so on, these people will be facing a pachad. They'll be facing a terror. It says here that Hashem is going to scatter the bones of those encamped against Yerushalayim. And it might be literal armies. We may see that, God forbid. Okay, we hope not. But it could also be referring to the UN, the EU, many of the Arab Muslim and non-Arab but Muslim countries, China, North Korea, Iran, okay, and so on. They are very much united against us. Not everybody, but they're united against us purely for the sake of not only crushing the Jews, but crushing Hashem. These are people, if you're an enemy of the Jews, you're the enemy of God. And this is what this verse is really directly, it's more direct than an allusion. It's speaking about this idea that this degeneracy leads to terror. The only outcome for the nations that do this will be their own terror, their own fear. Okay. We would like to see everything happen peacefully and positively. That's also an option, but there would have to be wholesale changes in the hearts and minds of people. Now, one thing we know is the lower the level of freedom in a country, the more they despise Jews in Israel. So as freedoms are crushed, we see this occur more and more. Okay, let's finish verse 7. We're going to go to Zion. All right. Mi ten mitzion Yeshuos Yisrael, Veshuv Elohim Shavus Amo, Yagel Yaakov Yismach Yisrael. Okay. Oh, that out of Zion, out of Zion, will come Israel's salvations, when God will return the captivity of his nation. Yaakov will exult and Yisrael will rejoice. This verse is also in Psalm 14. It's 7, so we can see the continuation, the connection with Psalm 14. Also, it's a similar wording, but different in Psalm 126. We do say this verse frequently in other places. In Psalm 14, Yeshua Yisrael, it's a salvation, it's singular. And that's because it isn't total. As I mentioned in the beginning, in Psalm 14, it refers to the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash and the becoming of the redemption of the building of the second one. Here, it's referring the whole psalm to the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash. And if you're new, you can go back to the beginning and hear about that, how this refers to Titus and the destruction. And also here it's plural because it will be Yeshuos or Yeshuot, because it will be like all our salvations together. We need all those salvations. I say Yaakov refers to ordinary people, and Yisrael refers to the sages and tzaddikim. And the Malbim says that still it doesn't matter. Yaakov and Yisrael will exult, rejoice together. We will be finally unified, where each Jew can look at his or her neighbor and can feel nothing but love for them. They can look and see the Nakuda Tova, and the person standing next to them and the person far away as well. And please Hashem, we should experience this Achdus, this unity, and we should experience the Geula very soon in our time. Okay. So I am going to stop recording.